By the time of the death of Mary Kelly, which took place on Friday the 9th of November 1888 in Miller's Court off Dorset Street in Spitalfields, the newspapers had learnt from experience that the public appetite for any information on the case was insatiable. Consequently, when news of her murder broke, reporters scrambled to Dorset Street to try and uncover as much as they could about this latest atrocity. The police were giving little information away, but many of the locals were more than willing to speak to the journalists, even if they didn't know that much about the crime. Many of them claimed to have known Mary Kelly personally, and a large number of the fallacies about her that still circulate today can be traced to press reports that were gleaned from local gossip and which appeared in the newspapers over the weekend of the 10th and 11th of November. One person who seemed to have been more than happy to talk to a journalist was a 20-year-old woman by the name of Lizzie Albrook. She was interviewed by a representative from a press agency, possibly on the Friday afternoon, and she told the reporter that she resided in Miller's Court and claimed to have been on friendly terms with Mary Kelly on account of the fact that they were near neighbours. According to the subsequent article that appeared in many newspapers over that weekend, Lizzie had stopped by Mary's room for a chat on the Thursday night, the day before her murder. Mary had told Lizzie that she was heartily sick of the life she was leading and had warned the younger woman against going out on the streets as she had done. One of the newspapers that published the story in its Sunday edition that weekend was Lloyd's Weekly newspaper. Lizzie Allbrook, a young woman of 20 who resides in Miller's Court and works at a lodging house in Dorset Street, also made the following statement. I knew Mary Jane Kelly very well, as we were near neighbours. The last time I saw her was on Thursday night about 8 o'clock, when I left her in her room with Joe Barnett, who had been living with her. About the last thing she said was, "Whatever you do, don't you do wrong and turn out as I have." She had often spoken to me in this way and warned me against going on the streets as she had done. She told me too that she was heartily sick of the life she was leading, and she wished that she had money enough to go back to Ireland, where her people lived. I don't believe she would have gone out as she did if she had not been obliged to do so in order to keep herself from starvation. She had talked to me about her friends several times, and on one occasion she told me that she had a female relation in London who was on the stage. Of course, reading the full story, you can almost see it as a Victorian melodrama. The tragic murder victim, who had wanted to leave behind her life of immorality and return to the bosom of her family in Ireland, and the warning to a younger woman to avoid the life she, Mary Kelly, was leading at all costs, could almost be the plot from a set piece at one of the penny gaffs in the district. Given its mix of tragedy, regret and brutal murder, Lizzie Albrook's story proved irresistible to newspapers across the country, and it was duly repeated by many of them over the next few weeks. But some commentators have gone so far as to suggest that the story is just too like a melodrama to actually be true, and that, given that efforts to trace Lizzie Albrook in the official records have proved unsuccessful, she may have been nothing more than a figment of the reporter's imagination and her story a journalistic fabrication. However, there was certainly a woman in Mary Kelly's room on that Thursday night, since she was specifically mentioned by Mary Kelly's lover, Joseph Barnett, who had moved out of the room he and Mary Kelly had shared at 13 Miller's Court just a few weeks before. According to Barnett's later statement, he had stopped off at Mary Kelly's room at between 7 and 8 p.m. on the Thursday evening. There had, he said, been another woman there, albeit she left before he did. Since he didn't actually name the other woman, it is impossible to say for certain that it was in fact Lizzie Albrook. However, the time frame he gave does fit with the timings given by Lizzie Albrook to the journalist as to when she visited Mary Kelly in her room. Interestingly, Lizzie was mentioned many years later by one of the first police officers on the scene of Mary Kelly's murder. Writing in his memoirs, I Caught Crippen, published in 1938, by then retired Chief Inspector Walter Dew specifically mentioned Mary Kelly's last night and her exchange with Lizzie Albrook. Dew was probably using the newspaper article as his source, and it is apparent that he was ramping up the tragedy of Mary Kelly's last hours and of her regret for the life she was leading. But he also adds the fact that she may have had a premonition about what was to come. Just the night before, Marie had been fearfully discussing the killer of her kind with Lizzie Albrook, a 19-year-old friend.
"This will be the last Lord Mayor's show I shall see," said Marie tearfully. "I can't stand it any longer. This Jack the Ripper business is getting on my nerves. I have made up my mind to go home to my mother. It is safer there."
There can be little doubt that those fateful last words of Mary Kelly were dramatic embellishments added by the original journalist and Walter Dew. As for Lizzie Allbrook, if she did exist, and did, as was claimed, spend time with Mary Kelly on the night before her death, and their conversation did take place as reported, then she provides us with a poignant glimpse of Mary Kelly's frame of mind in the final hours of her life.